Hey, Amanda, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am good, no horrible complaints. We are one short of a quorum, so I figured we'll give it just another couple of minutes for people to log in.
Sounds good.
Is next week's meeting on Tuesday?
No, it will be on Monday.
Yeah, from here on out, we'll be back to Mondays. We just had Memorial Day and then a conflict yesterday. So we'll be back to Mondays for the remainder of the call.
And with Jody on, we now have a quorum. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a couple of things. One, I will be sharing the screen just so we can track what CRs have been covered. This is being recorded. It'll be loaded up to the CMAC YouTube channel, hopefully later this week or early next week. We are, based off the TRC decision last week, we will be engaging in some limited discussion just because of time. We still have 400 outstanding CRs that need to be discussed. So unfortunately, that does mean a more limited time to discuss each one in order to get our chart of work done by mid-July. So with that being said, as a reminder, if you are not on the TRC, please mute yourself, as only TRC members are to speak in this meeting. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda. Amanda, take it away.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. I just wanted to make a quick note. I apologize that I was using the incorrect agenda last week, so I know a few of you were confused about the order, but the CRs that were more up front were actually ones that were intended to be moved to June because they were being revisited. So I'm sorry for any confusion, but we'll just, those have been moved to June and we will address those. First, I wanted to take, we had one person that one CR that we discussed maybe doing some CR discussion over email, and there was one CR that Kevin had from last week that we had a bit of email discussion for. So that was CR 4753-0001. So it was, Kevin's on the call, so I was wondering if he would just give a real quick overview and maybe we could take a vote on that one. We had some good discussion over email, so then hopefully we can just take a vote and get that one under our belt.
Sorry, had to find the unmute button there. Got it. Yeah, so basically this is one of John Kelly's CR that's seeking to add language that requires the spa filtered return inlets to not be placed in the backrest part of the seating area of the spa, like hydrotherapy jets are typically placed, but rather place them below the seating area in order to help discourage bathers from lingering in the spa when the timer for the jets turns those jets off, and also to limit the potential for exposure to heated return water before it blends with spa water. The TSC believes that this is justifiable from a safety and health perspective, and they recommend a yes vote. I agree. We've had some questions on it. Do we? Well, I'll let
Kevin, let me interrupt real quick. You are very, very faint, and we're having a hard time hearing you, and it may not be captured adequately by the recording.
Okay. How is it now? Any better?
That's some, yeah.
Let me grab a different set of headphones, and I'll be right back with y'all.
Great, thank you.
How is that?
Much better, much better.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I had the wrong microphone selected on my computer. All right, let me just get back to that summary. All right, so this is the change request from John Kelly seeking to add language that requires spa filtered return inlets to not be placed in the backrest part of the seating area in the spa, typically where hydrotherapy jets are placed, but rather require them to be placed below the seating area in order to help discourage bathers from being in the spa when the timer for the hydrotherapy jets turns those jets off, and also to limit the potential for exposure to heated return water before it blends with the spa water. The Technical Service Committee believes this change request is justifiable from a safety and health perspective and recommend a yes vote, and I agree with that.
So this is Joe Stefaniak. The only question I had is, are we precluding then the installation of any inlets, return inlets in stairwells? So some of the commercial spas that have a stairwell will be creating almost a dead pool in that stairwell area if we only put them under the benches. And I'm not opposed to the change request. I just had that question.
Hey, Joe, this is Miklos. I don't recall any specific wording about the stairwell in that CR, but I agree with you. We often will put jets along the stairwell for that reason exactly.
In looking at this, it is specifically talking about the backrest, so I don't think that a stairwell would be impacted by this.
It sounds like from my reading that as long as you have a minimum of 2 inlets below the surface of the underwater bench, then you're okay, and you can put other ones wherever. I'd have to pull up the actual section to see if there's any other requirements for inlets besides this section.
I remember the section being pretty open about the inlets. I looked through it quite a bit. I'd probably be all right with it as it's worded.
Yeah, reading the way it's currently worded without the added verbiage, you just need to have a minimum of 2 inlets. With the added verbiage, it would be 2 inlets below the water surface. Yeah, not on the back of a bench. So if you would have to have additional inlets then if you did want to have some on the stairs, but it looks like that would not be prohibited from this.
So with that being said, are we saying that if you have 2 below the surface of the bench, then you can have more that are in the back of the bench, and then that kind of defeats the purpose of the change request?
Ooh, that is the way I think it's written, but somebody else needs to read this to see what you think.
Yeah, I know.
No, I think this is specifically saying that they can't go in the backrest part of the seating area.
Yeah, the way it's worded though is not the way it's. Let me just read it to you guys. The way it's the way the change request is written. You don't have it in front of you. Spa shall have a minimum of 2 adjustable filter system inlets located below the surface of the underwater bench and spaced at least 3 feet apart and designed to distribute evenly. So I'm reading that to where if you go beyond the minimum and have extra inlets, that you could put them on the backs of the benches.
Correct.
It almost seems like it would be better to add a prohibition for where you can't put the inlets than where you have to, if the intent is to not locate them on the backrest part.
I would agree with that.
So Kevin, as the CR submitter, do you maybe want to try reaching out to the submitter to mention kind of these issues we've brought up and see if he would be amenable to modified language that, or propose some modified language that specifies where they can't be installed to better, to meet the intent of what he's trying to do, but then also not prohibit other designs or not have unintended consequences where you, as long as you have your two inlets below the surface of the underwater bench, you can put them anywhere else. Not that you probably would want to, but theoretically, based on how it's worded, you might be able to do that. And then we can revisit the CR.
I am honestly trying to follow and understand what y'all are saying. I'm reading it again right now, and it says that it must have a minimum of 2 adjustable filter system inlets located below the surface of the underwater bench. So all this is saying is that the existing wording, we're adding to it that they have to be located below the surface of the underwater bench. Would the steps not be below the surface of the underwater bench?
Not necessarily. In the stairwell, I mean, if you put it in a step near the bottom, maybe, but if you put it in the wall in a stairwell area, it could be above it. And as it's written now, I don't think it adequately addresses if the intent is to take them out of the bench. I think the way that it's written now means that you could have 2 that are below the bench, but you could still have all those other ones in the bench if you want. So it would be better if you took that middle piece, the addition, out and just wrote, spa shall have a minimum of 2 adjustable filter system inlets spaced at least 3 feet apart and designed to distribute flow evenly. And then a second sentence that said inlets or filter system inlets should not be placed in the backrest of an underwater bench or seat or whatever.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, so why don't we, you can reach out to the submitter and then we'll add this to a later call to just revisit really quick, depending on what the submitter, how he replies. Okay, let's move on to, we had hoped that we could just vote on this easily, but
Yeah, sorry about that.
this is how these things go. So the interactive water play venue design ad hoc committee has a bunch of CRs, so those will be up front on the agenda. Then I also included, there's a little bit of a gap where there's another CR carried over from an older call, but then there's another group of CRs that all had kind of the same theme that were related to secondary disinfection and interactive water play venues. So I included those on this call as well, just so that, because some of them are kind of, related. And Miklos has the lion's share of these CRs, so there's a lot of prep for him on this call. And thanks to everyone too for sending out summaries beforehand. I think, hopefully we can get to some of those later CRs, and it's good to be able to review those real quick before the call. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Miklos to start that discussion of all these interactive water play venue design CRs.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda. So do you want me to go through mine first, and then is the ad hoc committee, how do those not, we don't vote on those at all?
No, the ad hoc committee, that chart of work, we did not send those to the TSCs because those were CMAQ sponsored committees, similar to a TSC. So we would be voting on the CRs by the ad hoc. Now, here's a caveat. If we think that we do need to refer these to a TSC for review, that is always the purview of the TRC.
Yeah, just because it's an ad hoc committee doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we're going to recommend a yes vote without, you know, assessing it. And, you know, obviously a lot of the work has been done and a lot of considerations, but we always want to make sure that we review everything and make sure that it fits in with the existing MAC and the context, and that, you know, there aren't any unintended consequences. So I think that, you know, why don't you present them? If there's a rep from the ad hoc committee today, if we have any questions for clarification, we can certainly ask. And, you know, make sure that, you know, even just simple things like design requirements being in the design section, operational and operational section. So I think just going through each one, we'll just address one by one and then determine what our recommendation would be.
Okay, I apologize. I did not prepare the interactive water play venue design ad hoc committee CRs because I apologize. I was under the impression that because it was sent to the ad hoc that I wasn't presenting those.
Okay, yeah, that's understandable actually, because so these were prepared. The CR submitter is technically the ad hoc committee. So I think, let's see. Has everyone reviewed these CRs? Because I think we can still kind of start talking about them. A lot of them may need to be deferred eventually, but just kind of, you know, start talking about these ideas, especially because some of them are related to the other ones that are going to be addressed later on. But I'll leave that up to you, Miklos, if you'd rather. You know, we can. I have kind of summaries written down, and I can just pull them up and review them as we go.
That might be best. Some of them were pretty lengthy and kind of involved. So I was honestly, I was relieved once I realized that I didn't have to really, or when I thought I didn't have to present those. So.
Hey, Amanda, Ron George is on the line. I don't know if you want to unmute him because he's the one I think that submitted all of those change requests. I don't know if he's the chair of that committee. And I don't know if he would be prepared to present them at the last minute like this, but it might be worth asking him.
I think in the interest of time, I think we can just review them quickly, and then we can see whether we're going to have, you know, to postpone discussion to get a little more, just have, you know, start the discussion of them.
Let's do that, Amanda.
So,
if you want to run through them, if I have anything to add, because I did review them, but if I had anything to add or any comments, I can do that.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to pull it up, but so the first one was 473322-0002. And this one would require that, so it adds to the code section, the secondary disinfection system shall be located in the treatment loop post-filtration and treat a portion up to 100% of the filtration flow prior to return of the water to the aquatic venue or aquatic feature. And then the proposal is to add the following to the end of that sentence: except on interactive water play aquatic venues. For interactive water play venues, the secondary disinfection system shall be located after the feature pump to treat 100% of the water prior to reaching the patron.
Now, this one, Amanda, I think it was Ellen sent me the letter from the 2018 MAC review. And there was another CR kind of related to this, and the comments from the CDC were there was a concern about cost impact, that, as an example, an actual interactive water play feature system in operation has about a 900 GPM passing through the UV system, which, so if it was going to meet that standard that we were just talking about, it would need to pass all 900 gallons per minute through that UV system. But has a total of 9,060 flowing through various other aquatic features. And so like, oh, sorry. So the 900 would be the flow rate, but depending on the amount of features, you could have 10 times that flow rate that would need to pass through the secondary disinfection systems. And so that was one of the reasons that they decided to not include that CR, to not allow that change.
Right, and this effectively prohibits a pretty popular design option to, install it just as part of the regular system, post-filtration. And
correct, and that was
we require like a filtration to feature, flow ratio, and there's certain requirements to make sure that, if this option is selected, that you're still being protective. And I think that's so the predominant, or the view of the committee would be that this would be the way to ensure that you're getting 100% of the treatment. I think it also goes into the next CR, just to jump a little bit, the 47333-0001. So it's also including that when the features are off, the UV shall continue to circulate a minimum amount of water through the tank. So that almost seems like you're not going to run your features 24 hours a day, so you would almost need to install a valve and piping to divert the water from the features so that they, it can go back through the recirculation loop for the times when it's not operating. And I wasn't sure if that was taken into account during, they had some cost estimates and things. But so this would be, to install the UV, if you want the UV to be working, continuously and not just when the features are on, you're going to have a way to redirect the flow so that you can, have it in that treatment loop, but not going out through the features and back down through the drain, essentially.
Right, and this might be something that I would have to ask one of our engineers about, because I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But if you size a UV system for, let's say, a 9,000 gallon per minute, as the CDC used in their comments, if you size the UV system for 9,000 gallons per minute, but then those water features are off and you're only flowing, let's say, 900 gallons per minute through that UV system, is that system still going to work? Is it going to register as no flow because of the 10 times change?
Right.
I just think, I'm sure there's a way to engineer that to where it works. I'm just not sure of how that is done, and I'm not sure that that's been totally taken into account yet.
Hey, this is James. I'm on that interactive committee, and we definitely looked at this 100% flow thing, with a lot of different scenarios. But the gist of it is this is the only way to avoid the gauge bidwell issue, where only 63% of the water gets treated per turnover. And if you had an infinitely effective treatment system, it's still only 63% effective if only 63% of the water is treated. So the only way to really avoid that is to push all the water through the UV or whatever the system is. And so if you're going to require a 3-log system, it only makes sense to do it in this manner. And we looked at the cost, we looked at the flows, and Ron George talked in detail and sent out diagrams of exactly how all these things would work. And you have to design these so that there's actually flow at all times, particularly for a medium pressure system that builds up a lot of heat. But all these UV systems have kind of like a bypass loop installed when it's just very small piping that allows water to circulate when these systems are off. Because I originally thought that these UV systems would be 24-hour operation, but they're not. When the features are off, they typically turn these systems off, and that they go into this minimum recirculation thing.
So is this intended, so right now with the MAC and the UV, the idea is to get the 3-log reduction within about 9 to 12 hours. I'm probably not saying, it's either 9 or 12 hours. So this would basically be doing it pretty much every turnover. So there's a change here in what the acceptable risk would be considered to be, and the amount of time that you would have to basically achieve your 3-log reduction. Is that correct, or do I have this wrong?
Yeah, it's a pretty significant change. I mean, you could achieve in 12 hours, you know, the 99% reduction or whatever you're going after using the old design. But the problem with that is it never makes any sense mathematically or economically to go over 90% reduction. Because, you know, once you exceed 90% reduction, you know, the curve is so flat, you get no bang for the buck for going 99 or 99.9. So there were a number of proposals, and that's actually what would happen if this were a kiddie pool, for example, instead of an interactive play feature. So if you had, you know, thousands of gallons of water and you needed a pool treatment system, it would still be on that, you know, 9 to 12 hour thing where you're treating the side stream. But with that design, it doesn't make sense to go over 90% efficiency. So the idea on this was if you're going to have interactive play features and you're going to be spraying this in people's faces, you should probably get the 3 log reduction before you do that. And when we looked at the actual costs and benefits associated with that, it seemed to only make sense to require these interactive play features that didn't have a big pool. They only have a 5,000 gallon tank to treat water in this way. It wouldn't be like a MAC wide or a pool wide thing. It would just be for spray features.
So James, this wouldn't be for spray features that are on a larger pool?
There's MAC language that specifically addresses if you have a combined venue. I think if you have a combined venue, then it's required to have supplemental disinfection. Yeah, I think that if you had a combined venue, it would be required to do this.
And so it would be required then on the 100% flow through the spray features, which I think gets me to the point I was making before, is it could be really cost prohibitive depending on how large those spray features are. You could end up having either needing multiple UV systems to meet that requirement, or a single large system, in which case all the water features would need to be tied to that UV. And so it would be in kind of like an all or nothing type deal. You turn them all on or you turn them all off.
Yeah, my guess is you wouldn't ever design a system that would be combined with a spray feature and a pool if you had to flow all the water through the UV. So I don't think we really looked closely at that option just because it didn't seem like it would be highly likely. I mean, in a swimming pool where you're putting the water in and taking it back out, you're automatically going to have that gauge bidwell dilution thing, and you're never going to get the benefit of a 3 log validated system. So the only place you can really do that is in a full flow water feature.
So but as it's written, is it written for just spray grounds, or is it written?
Yeah, so it's just for interactive water play aquatic venues, which are essentially just spray grounds. There's no standing or captured water as part of the bather activity area.
Okay, then I apologize. Then disregard my comments.
Well, are we sure? Because where does it talk about combined venues the way James was talking about? Because, yeah, when it says interactive water play aquatic venues, when you do have a combined venue, and if it's defined as a spray pad just because you have sprays in the pool, I'm not sure about that.
That was my understanding, that if you had
spray ground would be no standing water. So this is only to the section of the code that specifically deals with interactive water play venues, aquatic venues.
Yeah, there's no intention of having full flow treatment on these pools, just because, you know, you can't have all the water that the patron's exposed to being treated, because it's all mixed back into the pool. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. And you can still have high risk pools, but they wouldn't be elevated to this standard because of the law of dilution and stuff associated.
I realize it wouldn't make sense, but I'm just wondering whether that's the way the MAC is really written or not.
I think the idea, at least the thinking, was that because say you have a wading pool or an activity pool with spray features, the volume would be enough that you would be getting dilution from that, and so needing to treat all the feature water prior to return wouldn't be as essential, or not essential, but you're going to get the benefit of dilution where on these smaller tanks, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, I just looked at the definition, and the definition does say that these venues do not incorporate standing or captured water as part of the bather activity area. So, so I think in this specific instance, then yeah, I'm good with it. I apologize. I was under the wrong impression.
Wait, sir, because I was just looking at a different section of the MAC, and I'm not sure. I'm looking at 4712, where it says combined aquatic venue treatment. It says when treatment systems of multiple aquatic venues are combined, the design shall include all appurtenances, I can't say that, to maintain and measure the required water characteristics, including but not limited to flow, pH, disinfectant concentration. And then if secondary disinfection is required for an increased risk aquatic venue for MAC, then the secondary disinfections are required for all treatment systems that are combined with the increased risk aquatic venue.
So I think this would just apply to just interactive water feature venues, not increased risk venues. Is that correct?
Yeah, my reading would be that, say you had a spray ground that had the same system as a wading pool or swimming pool, then you would need to install UV after the feature flow for the spray ground based on this change request, but then you'd also have to have UV on the rest, or you'd have to on the water for the pool as well. I think I'm reading it right, but because you're always going to have the diversion of flow to the features, but essentially because it's sharing water, all the water has to have UV treatment. But I guess technically all the water could have UV treatment if you're not just diverting some of it to the features, or eventually it would. But that's a good question for how that would work.
Could we maybe just change the, go ahead.
Pool. Yeah, I think once it becomes a swimming pool or a combined venue, then one, the designer wouldn't want to put a spray pad connected to a pool because it would be much more difficult and expensive to treat it. But if it were a combined venue, then this wouldn't apply because it wouldn't just be a standalone spray feature. So I think the MAC is okay here, but I'm certainly open to interpretation.
Maybe could we amend the change request to say secondary treatment system for interactive water play aquatic venues with no standing water, to make sure that it's clear that if you have some spray features in a pool, that wouldn't be covered by this?
The no standing water. Yeah, it's already part of the definition.
Interactive water play venues?
Yeah.
So a separate question. So the 100% of the water, it's not, I don't know the way it reads, I don't know if it is talking about 100% of the total volume of water, or if it's talking about 100% of the water that is being returned to the pool via that particular feature pump, right? So if you do have separate filtration pumps that are different from a feature pump, I don't know if that changes the design. I don't even know if they designed them that way, but in theory, you could have a separate filtration system versus separate feature pumps.
Yeah, that's the intention here, is that 100% of the water that's going to the people, that's being sprayed into these jets and sprayed into people's faces, 100% of that water goes through UV. Now there's still a separate filter system and probably a separate pump that's going to meet that 30-minute turnover time and that sort of thing. So right. separates those two systems, and it only puts UV on the feature flow.
Right. So even if we were talking about a combined use venue, then the filtration that's being returned back to the pool itself would be separate from the UV requirement on the feature pump or the spray feature itself.
Yeah, even if it was a combined venue, it would be, yes.
So that makes a little more sense.
Hey guys, this is Jason. The reason for this, to get down to the reasoning is on splash pads that the water recirculates back to the tank. So not a combined system. You have a 5,000 gallon tank, and you have you have these interactive water features that are pulling and returning water to this tank faster than the filtration system can keep up. So the reason for this is if you have an incident that a biological incident in the water, that the filtration system, if the UV were on this filtration system, it would not have time to combat that before the water is returned back to the spray features and actually spraying people in the face. And that's that's how we know that most waterborne illness is transferred. So that's the reason for this. And it's regarding cost prohibitive. I've been designing and building splash pads this way for years. I don't find it cost prohibitive. I think it lowers the risk dramatically in these standalone units. And it's actually a requirement in both Oregon and Washington State that 100% of the feature water has secondary sanitation on it, and it's for this reason. And I think this is the way it's written is good, and I think we should just have a yes vote on this particular one, non-combined, because on combined systems you have the benefit of dilution it back into the body of water. On these standalone systems you do not.
And in these systems, do they design it so that when the features are off, they can still treat the water with UV by just diverting the water from the features just into an internal loop of piping? Or how do they get UV on it for the rest of the time that it's not in operation?
When they're not in operation, they normally just have treatment by just your primary sanitizer. I've done them with both. I've put a smaller UV system, just a low pressure UV system on the recirculation tank. But I mean, the idea is that once the feature is active, you're treating 100% of the water through secondary sanitation. So you're still getting that kill rate before the water comes out to the venue. So it's really, you can go back and forth on that, but it's debatable whether it would be needed on the filtration system.
Right.
Because
I'm just wondering if.
Correct.
So I'm just wondering if there's a requirement that, I know that the water has to be recirculated continuously, even though there might be some allowance for turn down. I'm just wondering if the UV has to be continuous to, I'm going to look around here, or if it's just being recirculated. I'm worried about unintended consequences if it's only being used, the UV is only in operation when the features are in operation, but depending on the requirements.
Yeah, I think it's accurate to say that the UV is turned off when the feature is not active, and that's what he was saying a minute ago, is you only have chlorine and filtration for, if it's 12 hours a day that the feature's off, then for that 12 hours a day, you only have sand filters and chlorine.
Right.
The one thing that I see with this is that the potential issue is with medium pressure UV systems, because there's a warm up, there's a ramp up factor to a lot of these systems, and during that time you may not be getting 100% UV when the system is started up. So ideally, you'd want to use medium pressure in an indoor facility to get those benefits, but you have immediately when the system fires up, you wouldn't be getting 100% UV, at least to my knowledge, 100% UV to that water that's going to the water features. Low pressure is a little bit different, and almost instantaneous, you're at 100%. But the drawback is you don't get a lot of the benefits of medium pressure UV. So on our systems, we've decided to just go to low pressure for that reason, and not medium pressure, because we figure the risk is worth more than the benefits that you get from medium pressure in regards to chloramine reduction and things like that.
Hey, Amanda, when we talked about this for the 2018 MAC, eventually CDC vetoed the CR, but we did add a statement in there that read, on systems designed with a separate filter loop, when the features are off, the UV treatment system shall continue to provide disinfection according to 47332. Because I remember having discussions about features that, like, there's a button, right, that kids can push to get flow, where it can be on and off and on and off, randomly at different times. And yeah, just to be really flexible enough to cover everything. That's, at the time, we were thinking that was the best way to do it, but maybe there's a better way to do it than that.
And that's why we've gone to low pressure, is so when you do have that on and off, so you're not wasting energy, water, etc., heat, your UV is in full ramp up mode right away to the features. So you're still getting 100% treatment at all times.
So for people who are using medium pressure, how do we write the MAC flexible enough to allow that and still have the intent? That's
the hard part. that's the hard part for me. That's what has been difficult for me with this whole thing.
And
I think the Band-Aid here is the warm-up period. If you just say it has to be up to 100% after the warm-up period, you can program in a 30-minute, 45-minute, or whatever you need warm-up period. And then there's even mention of the warm-up period in this CR here. Sorry to cut you off there, man.
That's okay.
In features without full supervision, so say you have a feature that's standalone in a park somewhere, or that doesn't have full lifeguard, how are you going to keep people out of the water for 15 minutes, or 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, however long the ramp-up period is on a medium pressure UV?
Well, I would assume you just don't open the gates until it's warmed up and ready to operate. You don't let people into the water.
The way a lot of these systems are designed, it's completely unsupervised. You walk up to a start-stop button. It's timer operated, so you're not having people take baths in it at night, but when you, or use it and play in it at night, but when at 9 a.m. when the park opens, from 9 to 7 p.m., for example, somebody can walk up and hit that button. That feature runs for 15 minutes to a half an hour, and then you got to go hit the button again, because you get into energy savings things if this feature turns on and starts running all day long.
Well, maybe it's something where they would have to have either some sort of fencing or, performance based so that they can use this option, but they're going to have a way to, control the hours of operation so that people can't go in during that time.
To me, low pressure makes the most sense. It almost solves itself, but it doesn't, because low pressure makes sense outdoor, where most of these features are, where, just unsupervised, people can walk up and hit the button and play in the water, versus indoor facilities where typically you have supervision that will start the system and let it run all day while the indoor facility is in operation, where the medium pressure UV would be used. But it's hard to write it into language.
Yeah, I think even those features wouldn't be allowed in the MAC because it requires continuous recirculation and filtration. And it sounds like those features don't have that.
No, they still
So-
recirculate. They still recirculate the water and filter the water 100% of the time. There's a separate pump and filtration system that recirculates the tank. We're just talking about the features that are drawn from said tank is what we're discussing now. It still operates the same way.
Okay. I've
Okay,
never
so-
seen one.
For they have to maintain in section 5.7.1, they have to, all components of the filtration and recirculation system shall be kept in continuous operation 24 hours per day. And even if you do turn down, you have to maintain required disinfectant and pH levels at all times. I don't know if you would argue that the secondary disinfection, the UV, would be a component of the filtration and recirculation system or not. I guess that's one question. And the other question is that really the design for those is all based on achieving the 3 log reduction in a certain time frame. So if you're hitting it, the 100% of the water, through the feature, then you're achieving that even if it's not continuous. But I guess the question is whether, there is, the intent is to require the UV to be continuous or not based on the recirculation requirements.
Well,
Yeah, that's not the intent.
a UV designed for the filtration system on a 5,000 gallon tank, in a lot of cases would not be able to keep up with the flow rate of the features. And that's why it does make the most sense to just run primary sanitation in the tank, and your secondary sanitation on the features, because that way you're getting your full treatment of the water that's coming out and spraying people in the face. If you were to try to put the UV on the T, you wouldn't be able to bypass, and that came up earlier, was trying to bypass some of the filtration water into the UV or some of the feature water. That's fairly cost prohibitive too, because then you're recirculating your 5,000 gallon tank, for example, at 500 GPM, and there has to be some energy consideration and things like that involved.
Sure. Yeah,
So
I just want to make sure that there's nothing in the existing MAC that's going to make, requiring the location of the UV as is proposed, make that not an option based on the recirculation requirements. But I don't see anything that specifically says that you have to continuously operate, the UV system. So it sounds like that is a viable option to just put the UV on the features, even though the features aren't going to be operating 24 hours a day. But that's my reading right now. So I just was wondering if anyone else had any thoughts. Otherwise, I think.
I work for City. This is Tina Moore. And I just wanted to let everybody know on the secondary disinfectant or treatment, however you want to go, they always have an alarm they always monitor it 24 hours a day with the electronic system. I don't know if that helps or not. I got in here late. Thanks.
So do you guys think that text that was drafted back in 2018 helps any or not about requiring the UV to continue to treat the water according to 47332 when the features are off?
I don't think it's necessary if it's going to treat the water before it gets to the person.
Yep.
Well, if you have a billion oocysts, right, in a fecal accident, 3 log reduction really isn't getting you below the infective dose. It's certainly helping a lot, but it's not getting you below the infective dose.
Well, I think that's all taken into account with the model, and that, if you look at the calculations, you may have a billion oocysts, but you're going to dilute them into a 5,000 gallon tank, and then you're going to remove 99.9% of those with the UV disinfection. So I think by the combination of dilution and reduction there, that the swallowed dose on average is not going to be effective. And yeah, Doug went through those calculations many times before that committee finished up, and I think he was happy with this, being on and off 12 hours a day, as the feature is on and off, and also that the effective dose is going to be achieved actually a whole lot better than existing systems, because there is no 63% gauge bid well to wait on, so you're getting 100% through.
Yeah, because the CDC letter that vetoed that change request from 2018 said that it would still be an effective dose.
Yeah.
I keep looking over at 473333. UV equipment shall be installed after the filtration and before the primary disinfectant. So it sounds like if we have an opportunity for the water to go from the tank straight to the feature with a separate pump and line, but have a UV in that line, it will totally skip the filtration. And 473333 says filtration has to come first, then UV.
Except on the interactive play features or venues, right? They're proposing an exception for interactive water play venues there. So it doesn't have to be on the filtration.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't have the CR right in front of me, so I got you now.
Yeah.
And there are a few change requests for that section of the MAC that are coming up to 473333. So that those might be intended to make that section more compatible.
Well, and at the end of the day, I think the intention is that, contact with bathers is 100% treated with the right reduction. Whatever's in the tank is a separate issue that can recirculate through that tank as long as it's not making its way to contact with users. So
yep.
I think that's as long as we can separate the feature pumps from the filtration in interactive venues, which the exception sounds like it allows, I don't see it as a big issue on the feature pump side, because we'll shut that down, other than maybe that ramp up and cool down period, as was mentioned before. But the premise is good. We're keeping it away from the end user. It can stay in that tank and be treated separately, as long as before it gets to the users, it's treated 100% with the right reduction.
Personally for me, I'm for the CR, and I was for the one back in 2018, and I was disappointed that it was vetoed by CDC. But I think we need to be prepared to address the issues that were brought up in the CDC letter to make sure that it doesn't happen again if this passes again. If it makes sense.
Regarding it being cost prohibitive because of the size of the unit, that can be mitigated by valve control. So what I do to keep the energy savings, 1, 2, UV size down on these features is I run a lower volume of water to even a large feature, and just use solenoid operated valve control system that essentially sends the water to different things at different times. So you're still getting activity throughout a large splash pad. You're just not moving 9,000, quote unquote, 9,000 gallons of water to the feature. So that's an argument for that in regards to being cost prohibitive, is that you do not need to run 100% of your features 100% of your time of the time.
And Jason, you said that Washington and Oregon are already requiring this?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
So does anyone, do people feel like we should take a vote? Obviously, this is a substantive CR, but we have spent a good amount of time on it. So we should probably either decide to vote, or if there's things that people want to look into more, we should identify those so that we can revisit the CR at a future time.
I'm good to vote.
I want to vote.
I'm good to vote.
Okay. So why don't we do, is there any members that are not in favor that would recommend a no vote on CR 473322-0002? Okay, hearing none, it looks like the Technical Review Committee is unanimously recommending a yes vote on the CR. So Nicholas is the champion. You can write this one up. And let's move on. Hopefully now that we've had some of this baseline discussion, the next few items will go a little bit more quickly. There's some operational, actually these are all design items. But let's go on to the next one. So the next one is 473333-0001, and it involves requiring that the UV system after the feature pump to treat 100% of the water prior to reaching the patrons, and then when the features are off, the UV shall continue to circulate a minimum amount of water through the tank if required by manufacturer for warm-up and cool-down purposes.
So this would address that warm-up period that James, you were talking about. Is it James?
Yeah, what I was talking about.
Yeah. Let's vote.
Okay, if nobody has any comments, we can take a vote on 473333-0001. Again, I'll ask, does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR? Okay, hearing none, I will note that the TRC is recommending unanimously a yes vote on this CR. Let me pull up the next one. The next one is 0.11-001. This one is requiring UV equipment to be tested and certified to NSF 15.9 to provide a chloramine reduction so that the chloramines, when measured, shall be no greater than 0.4 parts per million, which is the same. Just as a note, that's the same as the combined chlorine maximum requirement in the MAC. I guess when I was reading through this, I just had one quick question about this. So I thought that the wavelength that was used, or UV, for chloramine destruction was different than that used to inactivate crypto. So I was just wondering if the same lamp would be able to do both, if they're close enough within the range, or if this would require a separate unit to be installed as well.
Yeah, I think these are medium pressure systems that are designed for chloramine, and the medium pressures are polychromatic, so they do multiple wavelengths, where the low pressure is only 254 nanometers. The medium pressures are polychromatic, and they can do multiple different things.
So would this essentially require operator or designers to use medium pressure lamps? And if so, does that have issues if there are certain circumstances where low pressure would be more ideal, like the outdoor spray ground?
The way I'm reading this is just talking about a chloramine reduction. I wouldn't think this would be required for a lot of facilities. Particularly, I would think it would only be for indoor. I'm not sure exactly which section this falls into, but I would see no benefit in having UV, medium pressure UV in an outdoor facility where air quality is not a big concern.
well, this requirement requires that the UV use in the, I think for, let me see the section,
I think it's for all UV.
473. So
Yeah, it would say all UV systems,
for all
which
UV, so you're basically having, and if you're being required that it's certified and tested to NSF 50, section 15.9 to provide chloramine reduction. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of different ways to reduce chloramines. I'm not sure if the vote is, I know a couple of years ago, at least, there was, you know, thoughts that UV might be able to address the chloramines, and I always mix it up, whether it's organic or inorganic, that can really only be reduced through water removal and replenishment. But obviously there's different ways to reduce chloramines in terms of breakpoint chlorination and things like that. So I guess, you know, is this gonna, I don't know how many units out there are certified to this section. I think it's pretty new that, you know, the use of UV for chloramine reduction. And I guess the question is whether or not this would put, you know, would limit the options for people to use for UV that's intended for, you know, crypto reduction. You know, it's fine if people want to install something that has the added benefit of chloramine reduction, but is this going to make it less of an option for what the designer wants to do, knowing that there's already a limit in the max for 0.4 parts per million combined chlorine, and they just basically have to figure out how they want to design their system to do that.
Yeah, I don't think this is from Ron George, but I don't think it's a part of that interactive play feature committee. So I think this is maybe his own change request. So this one hasn't been discussed at length, but I would see no purpose in having this requirement for the reasons that you state. If, you know, it would limit it to manufacturers that do medium pressure and have it certified, and that seems unduly restrictive.
Just to note, it does say, you know, that the form says submitted on behalf of the CMAC Ad Hoc Committee on Interactive Water Play Venue Design. But, you know, obviously if you were on that committee and you don't remember, you know, having this up there, then.
Yeah, unless I missed a call or something, I don't remember this.
Amanda, does having the title chloramine reduction and then that section, does that, I know it doesn't explicitly state it, but does that mean that UV systems for the purpose of chloramine reduction?
I don't know. This would actually be a brand new section in the MAC too.
Right.
There is no existing section, but my reading is that, you know, that's just the title, basically what it's about. But it doesn't seem like, it seems like it's referring. It's just a general requirement because 4.7.3.3.3 is, you know, ultraviolet light system.
All systems
are already required to be validated and things like that, but now this is requiring that they, you know, also meet that NSF 50 standard 15.9 to provide chloramine reduction.
Right. I think how it's written, like we all said, it would take out low pressure systems for like outdoor use. So I'd probably vote a no.
Yeah, same here.
Same here.
Agreed.
Okay, why don't we take a vote on this CR then? Does anyone recommend a yes vote on CR 473311-0001?
Amanda, let me interrupt for one moment. James, since you sat on that committee, you'll need to abstain from the vote just in fairness. We have other committee members that have served on the ad hocs, and we'll be doing that to keep it from being weighed, so to speak. So just FYI.
I abstain.
Okay, hearing that nobody is recommending a yes vote, I will write that the TRC was unanimous with a no vote. I think that, you know, there probably is a place in the MAC for UV for chloramine reduction, and perhaps you know, that if it is used for that, it would be good to be certified to this standard, but we do have a general equipment section that does require, but you know, that might be a future thing if people are concerned about, you know, that they don't want, you know, if people, maybe people are marketing UV for chloramine reduction that isn't actually tested and validated to an NSF 50 standard. So that would be a different type of requirement. If somebody wanted to put in, you know, we're used for chloramine reduction, it must, you know, be tested to certified, listed, and labeled to NSF 50 section 15.9. But right now it reads as a requirement. So just wanted to note that.
Amanda, do we want to maybe suggest then that instead of voting against it, that we just move it to the supplemental treatment system and just renumber it as 4734?
No, because as it's written, it would still not allow for low pressure UV.
Okay.
Okay, and let's actually pause for a second. So Kevin mentioned that the submitter for 4573 has gotten back to him and is okay with the amended language to you know, to address some of the location. So why don't we vote on that CR with the amended language? And if Kevin, if you want to just give a quick sentence about the amended language, and then we can take a vote on that one, and then we'll just keep going with these UV ones.
Sure. So we're going to remove the underlined part, the amendment that he had submitted, and instead add a sentence after the language. So the whole thing would now read, spas shall have a minimum of 2 adjustable filter system inlets spaced at least 3 feet apart and designed to distribute flow evenly. Inlets must not be placed within the back of any seating areas.
Okay, so as modified, does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR? Okay, so I'll note that 4753-0001 is unanimous for a yes vote as modified and agreed to by the submitter. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so the next CR is 412843-0001.
I have it up. I can go through it.
Okay, is this a new section or?
Yeah, new.
I'll check that right now.
Yeah. So it would add language that valves shall be provided in the spray pad drain system to allow for discharging spray pad water to an approved means for wastewater disposal prior to returning to the treatment tank when the spray pad is not operational. It's basically allowing for that if water's collecting on the spray pad that it's able to be drained directly to waste and not through the treatment system. I don't see any issues with it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You said that it's if there's any standing water collecting on the pad.
Yeah, like if it's if there's like a rain event or it needs to be the purpose in the CR says that when the spray pad's closed and there's a rain event or is being cleaned, the water should not go back to the treatment tank. So yeah, the drains, so effectively the drains that are there in the spray pad itself, instead of the water collecting in that drain and going to the treatment tank while the spray pad's not in operation, you know, during the off season, you can have it drain directly to waste.
And this also makes sense for, you know, flushing it in the morning, say, before use, that you can just flush it to waste. You know, just to remove any debris. I think that's you know, that's something that we require in New York State.
And what's the control mechanism with valves, you said?
They're saying it would require a 3-way valve and PVC piping to the approved discharge source. So I think probably pretty minimal.
Okay.
It sounds pretty smart to me.
I like it.
Is there any reason not to vote for this? Sounds like there isn't.
Okay, so why don't we take a vote on 412843-0001? Does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I had a question. So
Oh, sure.
the drain valves are draining to a collection tank. So the wastewater valve has to be prior to the holding tank? Or can it be on the filter side of the holding tank? And if you do that, then you have to drain the entire holding tank.
Prior to the holding tank.
Prior to the holding tank. So you have to build a separate vault for a valve that's down at the bottom to eliminate any of that water.
Wow.
And so in Washington, we have a bunch of these because we have rain events all winter long
Oh,
when
yeah.
pads aren't open, and they build a diverter tank, a small diverter tank, and then the valves are shut off through the system, and then the other valves on the diverter tank are opened up to the waste disposal.
Does this allow you to just plug off the drain? Or are we requiring a valve to discharge it? It would make more sense to just plug the drain at the surface.
No, it's in the diverter
Oh,
tank,
that makes sense.
valve in the diverter tank.
You don't want I don't want
Ugh.
to plug the drain. You don't want to plug the drain.
It seems if you plug the drain, then you would create possible standing water issues.
You don't want to plug the drain because of stormwater. You don't want grass clippings to go to stormwater either.
So Cindy, as written, would this work with what's done in Washington State, that it's going to a diverter tank?
Well, we technically don't have any codes on it yet, but that's the way that they're being designed and approved. We're approving them that way, and they seem to work okay. But I'm not really sure if it's. I can't tell the way this one's written if it's very specific that there's a valve in a pipe. I was trying to catch that the way you were reading.
It's not specific, so it says would allow for discharging spray pad water to an approved means for wastewater disposal. So however the local jurisdiction would want to do it.
Exactly. And then we have to work with all of our stormwater drainage. I mean, it has to be approved by, we have 39 cities, so each city has their own set of regulations on that too.
So in that case, is there any way existing that they can flush the spray pad, like say before operation, without flushing the water down into the treatment tank?
Usually we require them to run it 15 minutes and it goes before they allow people in it, and it goes to the recirculation tank at that point. So the diverter system just works in the off season.
So would this be something that an indoor spray tank would even be like a useful requirement for?
Yeah, because if you're asking about like an indoor spray pad, if you were like, yeah, if you were say washing the deck and you don't want all that going into the collection tank and then being recirculated, you want that to go to waste.
Sure.
With the installation.
I mean, are there other options that people do for that? Because I know in New York you have to have it basically divert to waste and flush it every morning before operation. But are there other options for doing that than what's being required here?
What about a sump pump in the collection tank that would divert it to wastewater disposal?
Under the substantiate request section, it mentions that if the tank does not have a sump pump, it could overflow and cause spillage of the tank. So it almost seems to suggest that it should have a sump pump.
So if they already have a sump pump, then is the valving necessary, or is that already part of? Right, you have to have a valve, I would imagine, or some way of controlling that sump pump, or a float system or something.
So maybe the system's already achieving this intent.
I think the system is already dealing with excess water that gets into that tank by pumping it out through a sump pump system, but that doesn't necessarily stop any contaminants from washing the system off from draining in. This is trying to divert it before that even becomes an issue, if I understand it correctly.
That's the way I understand it as well.
Okay, so do we want to go back to the vote, or, sorry, Kevin, I think I interrupted you.
Can you read it one more time?
Sure. Valves shall be provided in the spray pad drain system to allow for discharging spray pad water to an approved means for wastewater disposal prior to returning to the treatment tank when the spray pad is not operational.
So it would be okay to go to the holding tank and be sumped out, but not to the treatment tank.
I think that's a part of that approved means.
Just as a reminder, for example, for that discussion about the holding tank, that could be flagged for possible annex information.
So do people feel comfortable taking a vote on this?
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone recommend a no vote on CR 412843-0001?
Yes, Joe?
Anyone else? Okay, so even with James abstaining, I'm not sure if we recommended that you did on this one or not, but I think we would still have enough to have consensus since there are 11 members on the call. So we can consider this one a yes vote with one recommended no. So let's go on to the next one.
I've got it up.
Again. Okay.
So this would be a new section following 412.863. And it's titled Volume. The volume of water in the treatment tank shall be sufficient to assure continuous operation of the filtration system. And it says the purpose, this is needed to ensure that the design, feature, flow rate, and time for the water to return back to the treatment tank are all taken into consideration to still maintain water in the treatment tank without cavitating the filter or feature pumps. Supporting information is this is best practice to not damage equipment being operated. I would agree.
Yeah, I think we might have skipped one.
Skipped one? This is 412.863.1-0001.
Yeah, we did skip one. So that was, there's a 412.863-.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I want to.
There's only like 10 numbers.
Yeah. Can we do this one since I'm on it, or do I need to go back?
Can we go back since this one builds off the 863?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's
Sure.
good.
Sure. 412.863, titled Capacity. The treatment tank shall have a minimum operational volume of 3,000 gallons of water. Purpose of this request to meet requirements of the MAC for water quality. The minimum volume of the treatment tank is necessary and essential, and a companion CR to meet the treatment goals of CR 473333, which revises placement of the UV system.
So I think this gets back to Ellen's comment about, are we actually getting the 3 log reduction and the minimum effective dose? So I think the 3,000 gallon tank is what's required to get
that dilution.
Yeah, diluted enough that the 99.9% UV will actually make it safe.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My only question was, does anyone design smaller spray grounds? Like, is this going to be really limiting if somebody wants to have a small one, or is this a pretty minimum size in general anyway for the operational volume?
Amanda, this is Chris.
Yes.
I can't speak to the UV part of it, but in Utah, we have a minimum of 1,000 gallons, and we've not seen that as being enough. We have a lot of splash pads that have issues with combined chlorine issues, chloramines, other water quality issues, and we've been looking at raising the value, but haven't been able to find a good standard to quote, or we've been looking what other states have done. I think this is close to what California's done. I can't speak to that, but I think so. So anyways, we do have a lower volume and we don't like it, so we're looking to raise it. And this would, I'm in favor of this. I like this.
Great. Yeah, I mean, even if we want to allow people to design something, if it doesn't make sense and it's really hard to operate, then, you know, in terms of for public health, it seems like if 3,000 is the number to really get enough dilution, given that spray grounds tend to be, you know, the higher risk venues, it does seem to make sense. If we're not, you know, I was worried if like half the spray grounds out there were really small and, you know, 3,000 was really big, but if it's on the lower end to begin with, and you've seen issues with smaller spray grounds and with water quality and the ability to operate them, you know, appropriately, then it seems like that this would make sense. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments on this one?
So mathematically, is 3,000 the right volume that we need to be able to make that 3,000 or that 3 log inactivation? Or is there a lower, is 3,000 a scientific number or a randomly selected number?
No, there's, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a calculated value, but the truth is that it may need to be an actual higher number if we get into water quality concerns. But that's not what this is all about, so I'm not going to open that can of worms. But I would say 3,000 is probably a good minimum.
Okay. Then I'm in favor.
Yeah, I just opened up the CR itself and the math is in there with the 3,000 gallon calculation if you guys want to look at it.
Yeah, it's all based on the dilution in the oocysts per gallon.
Yeah, that's addressing specifically at 100 million oocysts in 3,000 gallons. But what if you have more than that? Is 3,000 gallons enough? Or do we need to support that differently?
Ellen, do you know where that 100 million oocysts may have come from?
Is that a billion?
Yeah, I think that's from
Yeah.
CDC actually, with the assumptions that are done with the flow requirements for secondary disinfection. That I will check while we're talking and confirm that. It's in
I believe 1 billion is the number of oocysts that would be released in like the average diarrheal fecal incident. So it's basing it all off of that. And I think that's the basis for all the requirements for secondary disinfection.
Oh, so they actually didn't use the right number then? They should have used 1 billion instead of 100 million?
Yeah.
Let me check the annex.
I think that crypto accidents can typically range at the high end from 10 to the 8th to 10 to the 9th, which is 100 million to 1 billion. So I think they had to pick a number for this risk calculation. And it also assumes that there's only one fecal accident at a time, you know, and I mean, there's a lot of assumptions that go into these things, but
I agree. I was just thinking to be consistent with the assumptions, though, we might need to stick with what was already assumed, unless we want to argue to use different assumptions.
Well, by using 100 million, it's a very conservative estimate, which is
But
easier
would
to argue
probably
for.
All right. If it went with 1 billion, the required minimum volume of the tank might have to be bigger.
But, you know, some of the disinfection committee's work has shown that, you know, some of these numbers may not be nearly as high as, you know, particularly some people are asymptomatic and, you know, may have much smaller accidents and things like that. So, you know, you could argue both ways on this.
So the annex says a single contamination event of 100 milliliters of approximately 100 milliliters could introduce 10 to the 8th cryptosporidium oocysts into the water. Does anybody who has that off the top of their head, what is 10 to the 8th? Is that 100 million or is that 1 billion?
Yeah, that's 100 million. Yeah, what page is that on?
That is on page 90, or I'm sorry, 80. If you're looking at the PDF actual page numbers, it's 90, but the Mac page 80, Mac Annex page 80. So they are following the annex in that calculation.
Excellent.
So I'm assuming the annex is following CDC guidelines, so I would say then that's probably accurate.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
Okay, do you people feel comfortable voting on this one then?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually the annex in 473324 says that the secondary disinfection system is to be designed to reduce an assumed total number of infective cryptosporidium oocysts and the total volume of the aquatic venue from an assumed 100 million 10 to the 8th oocysts to a maximum concentration of one infective oocyst per 100 mil by means of consecutive dilution. Yeah. Okay, is there anyone who is not in favor of CR 4.12.8.6.3-0001. Okay, so I will record that as a recommended yes vote by the TRC, and that was unanimous. So now we can get to 412.8631-0001, which would be a subsection of the previous.
All right, let me get back there, sorry. Okay, and so this is titled volume. The volume of water in the treatment tank shall be sufficient to assure continuous operation of the filtration system. So we established 3,000 as the minimum, but then also needs to have enough volume to maintain continuous operation of the filtration system. I would think that's a no-brainer, but but maybe
well,
there's some.
Otherwise they wouldn't be meeting the requirements of this is a specific requirement for spray grounds, but obviously if they didn't, then they would not be meeting the requirements in, I think it's 5.7.1, the section I mentioned earlier about continuous recirculation.
Is this really needed? Like if you're having any of these plans go through anybody who knows anything, wouldn't they already catch that?
You would think.
I wouldn't assume common sense, and I think that the danger here is that, you know, if you're spraying water up in the air, you could have a spray pad designed where you have 2,000 or 3,000 gallons in the pipe and in the air at any given time, if the pad was big enough. So, you know, I think it's just trying to kind of mandate some common sense. Is if you're spraying up 2,000 gallons of water that's either in the air or on the pad coming back or in the pipes, that you could run the pump dry. And that wouldn't necessarily mean that you violated anything else. You know, it's just saying that you're overspraying.
My question to this is treatment tank the right term, or should it be collection tank? Because when it talks about 412.86 talks about treatment tanks, and it says the interactive water play venue collection tank shall be designed to provide ready access for cleaning and inspection. So we are talking about a treatment tank versus a collection tank. And I would think that the collection tank really is the one that needs to be sized to allow for sufficient continuous operation, not necessarily the, although I guess the treatment tank water should be the same, but it's there. If the collection tank runs dry, then there is no continued operation of the filtration system.
In 412.86, does the treatment tank and collection tank, are those terms used interchangeably?
I'm wondering that too.
It looks like it does, the way it's written. 412.86.
I didn't think that they were two separate things.
I'm not seeing the difference. Can somebody clarify?
If you look at 4.12.8.6, it does look like treatment tank and collection tank are being used interchangeably. I would assume they're one and the same. Has anyone ever designed one that has a separate collection tank from a treatment tank?
Yeah, so John Kelly will be all over this in 3 years if we use two different words for the same thing.
Yeah, I think it is something that could probably benefit from some consistency. I mean, it's a pretty small section in general.
Right.
It looks like collection tanks used a lot in the code language, but then treatment tank on the on some of the titles.
Yeah, collection tank is used when talking about like surge tanks.
Right.
Interactive water play venue collection tank is in all caps. So I would think it'd be in the glossary, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
I wonder if collection tank is its own definition. I doubt it, but that might just be like a typo. But I'll look
It
and
might
see.
be a typo. The all caps on 12.8.6 might be a typo because it's not in all caps in 12.8.6.1.
But it is other places too. 412, 841, it's in all caps.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't see treatment tank or collection tank in the glossary.
No.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Jason, when you design these, do you design two different tanks, or are we really talking about one tank here?
Oh, I know Jason could only be on the first hour of the call, so he may.
Oh, okay. Did he have to drop off? Chris, can you? Chris, have you seen designs where there's more than one tank? I mean, a collection tank that maybe is connected to a treatment tank, two different tanks?
I've only heard it discussed in theory. I think most just have the one tank, but it could be done the other way.
And actually, doing a search, the term treatment tank only comes up once in the MAC, and it's that title under that section. So perhaps we should reach out to the submitter and see, or the committee, and see if they're okay with changing that to collection tank to be consistent to the rest of the section. But otherwise, I think this is just a good reminder for how to achieve. It's a design item that'll help you achieve the operational requirement for continuous recirculation and operation of the filtration system.
Right, going back to the CR at hand.
Well, I think using the term treatment tank is probably best since it's under the 412.8.6 treatment tank title.
Yeah, the phrase collection tank is used everywhere else in 412.8.
And in that section as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So do we want to recommend, I assume that unless the committee, the ad hoc committee has a specific reason for using treatment as opposed to collection, that they would be okay with the change. Do we want to vote on it with the change and then just get, and then if the committee feels otherwise, we can revisit this one, but if not, we can just move forward?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So if we modify this CR, instead of using the term treatment tank, use collection tank, does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR 412.8.631-0001? Okay, hearing none, I'll report that the TRC is recommending a yes vote unanimously with that change from treatment tank to collection tank for consistency. So I guess it looks like Ron George was the one submitting on behalf of the committee. So Miklos, I think you were the champion for this one, right?
Yeah, I've got a note to reach out.
Okay, and just let us know if they say otherwise. Otherwise, we'll just say consider this one all wrapped up.
Amanda, just going back to the previous one, 412.8.6.3, they also use treatment tank there. Should we ask for that to be clarified to collection tank as well? Doesn't change the meaning of the thing that we voted on already.
I think that's a good point, because we would certainly want to be consistent between these two new sections, given that the 3.1 is a subsection of the 3. So yeah, I agree. That's good. Good catch. So Miklos, are you good with reaching out on that one too?
Yeah, say that again. So to change which wording? The title?
In 412.8.6.3, 4-12-8-6-4-0001, it requires the treatment tank to be at least 3,000 gallons. So we would, for consistency, change that to collection tank as well.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
This is probably something that would benefit from a definition or a little annex discussion in a future. We think, I mean, we could, technically they could add some annex discussion this time around, but otherwise, in the future, otherwise, I mean, it might be something that nobody would ever question, you know, the use of the two terms, but, you know, lawyers abound, so. Okay, so let's move on to 4-12-8-6-4-0001.
So this one is under the same section, so it would add a new subsection titled Overflow Pipe, and it says an overflow pipe to convey excess water, in parentheses waste, to an approved local source through a suitable air gap shall be provided. And it's an overflow pipe from the treatment tank or collection tank, as we've been discussing. And this is requested to prevent the possibility of a collection tank overflowing in a confined area that could cause damage to spray pad equipment or adjacent area. And it says that it's a best practice.
Where does it say the overflow pipe leads to?
Waste.
There was a previous comment or question along these lines about what if you had a sump pump in this tank?
Right.
Would this, if it's underground, you couldn't necessarily have an overflow pipe. You would need a sump pump. So that this one might interfere with that line of thinking. I don't know where these things are typically designed, but I would assume they could be located underground where it would be hard to have an overflow pipe that drain through an air gap into to a sewer, for example.
Yeah, I think this is more getting to if that holding tank overflows for some reason, I guess maybe through a rain event or something, you know, keeping it from overflowing. I don't know if that's possible or not.
Right, but wouldn't that be the purpose of the sump pump anyway, is to prevent it from overflowing? And so if you have a sump pump, you don't need that overflow pipe?
Yeah, as an operator though, you just want to make sure that sump pump is actually working, and I've had it not work before and walked into a pool that I didn't expect, so.
So you would need this regardless of whether you had a sump pump or not, then you're saying you need it as a backup?
It's not, yeah, what they're saying is, yeah, that this is needed regardless. It doesn't talk about a sump pump.
I'm trying to visualize how an overflow would work if these collection tanks, treatment tanks are underground, and even if you designed it so gravity pulled it down, you'd still have to pump. You'd still have to have a pump to get it back out. So it's almost the same idea as a sump pump.
Agreed.
Yeah, because what you're saying is if it's below grade, there's nowhere really for it to go. You'd still have to have some kind of pump to pump it to waste.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe it can go down grade to another holding tank, but then you'd have to have a pump to get it out of there to go to waste.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this one should say and or a sump pump combination, or, you know, I mean, I don't think this one should, you know, be so cut and dried as to ignore sump pumps or to require a pipe if it can't drain anywhere.
With that other CR requiring a means of draining the tank, is this something that is needed still, or if you're not specifically draining it, but you just don't want overflow, is this type of thing still needed?
I think they're two different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would vote to send this one back to the committee for consideration of a sump pump. If I could vote.
Or maybe just to reword it, saying like an approved means for discharge to avoid overflow shall be provided, something like that, that's even more general.
Yes.
I mean, in that case, if they're already designed that way, I mean, is this really needed at this point? Do we just vote yes or no? And if it's really an issue, it can come up next go around? Did that make sense, what I said?
Yeah, James, in your guys' discussion in the committee, did it sound like there was an issue where this specifically needed to be addressed right away?
Well, I think that, you know, clearly if you have these tanks that are overflowing and flooding control rooms, that you know, that there should be something in the MAC to kind of prevent that. All I'm saying is I think when the committee discussed it, I think we were just thinking, oh yeah, just have an overflow through an air gap to a sewer or whatever the local, you know, facility has. But I think we didn't consider the fact that they were, you know, underground and there may not be a place for them to drain to. So I think it's just the committee didn't look at it that closely. I mean, yeah, there should be a way for these things to overflow and not flood the control room. But, you know, there may have to be a sump pump in there, not just a pipe that goes to a sewer.
So does anyone want to volunteer to draft revised language to send back?
I think I heard James volunteer to work with the committee to do that.
I thought Ellen just proposed great language to say that it just needs to provide a means of draining so you don't flood the control room. Yeah, I really like that suggestion.
So James, you're proposing that wording then?
Yeah, I like the pipe or a suitable means that could include a pipe and or a sump pump. You know, a suitable means of draining to prevent a suitable means.
Can we say something like including but not limited to? Then provide an example of two, like a overflow pipe and sump pump.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. I mean, I think we're all trying to do the same thing here. This one's not complicated. It's just hard to word.
Okay, in that case, do we want to take a vote now with that proposed modification, and then we can just check again with this one back with the committee? Given that we have committee members on the call that seem to think that this would work within what they were trying to accomplish.
If we're able to do that, I'm good with that. Yeah.
I think we can. I think that'll help move things along, and you know, we can always revisit it if the committee has objections. Technically, the TRC can approve modified language without a submitter's okay, but generally we like to reach compromise. Okay, so does anyone recommend a no vote on 4.12.864-0001 with the understanding that the language would be changed to then require a suitable means of draining to prevent, I'm not getting all the words right, to prevent including but not limited to overflow pipe or sump pump. I guess prevent damage or I guess a suitable means to convey excess water waste to an approved source through, including but not limited to, overflow pipe or sump pump. You guys had it right. I don't know. I guess that's the intent. Is everyone okay with, do we have any recommended no votes if we have a change along those lines? And if someone wants
Are
to
you going to leave
propose
air
that
cap
language,
in there?
The wording will have approved, so.
Oh, okay. Approved local source or?
We can say AHJ approved.
Okay.
The air gap just prevents backflow from the sewer
Right.
into the tank. Yeah, so it probably needs to stay.
So can you repeat it one more time?
someone else has to have this down better than I do.
Well, Amanda, since we don't have the wording yet, and it sounds like there are some parts of the wording that might be sticking points. Why don't we reword it, and this should be an easy vote later on.
That sounds good. Okay, so we'll propose modified language and get the committee's input about the ad hoc committee, and then we'll revisit later. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, but we can move on to 412.865-0001.
Yep.
Amanda, I'm sorry, Amanda, if I can interrupt for a minute. We've had a lot of very, very good discussion. I am concerned about how long it's taking to get through some of the CRs, just because we do have a hard deadline on us for the entire chart of work. We're getting close to 3 o'clock Eastern. Is the TRC able to stay on to cover these next 3 CRs so we can at least get this block of CRs handled?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, this would be a new subsection titled Inlets, and it says recirculation system inlets shall be sized and positioned to provide for complete mixing in the tank. Yeah, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And since it doesn't specifically say treatment tank or collection tank, it can be for either.
I move that we vote.
I second that.
Okay, does anyone recommend a no vote on 412.865-0001? Okay, hearing none, I will record that the TRC is recommending unanimously a yes vote on this CR. And the next one will be 412.866-0001.
So again, another section titled Screen or Similar Device. A screen or similar device shall be provided through which all water from the spray pad shall pass before entering the treatment tank, or another method to provide for removal of debris on the surface layer of the treatment tank water. And the explanation is, by providing a device prior to the return water reaching the treatment tank, it reduces the need to drain or clean the bottom of the tank, which is much more difficult than cleaning the bottom of a pool daily. Local jurisdictions usually require confined space equipment in order to enter the tank and clean it. If a device is in the main drain or a sump pump prior to the tank, a basket or similar device can easily be cleaned by general maintenance personnel regularly. It could also reduce the cost of draining the tank in its entirety.
I know this one sounds like a no-brainer, but I'm just wondering if we can take off the last part of the statement. So if we just say to provide removal of debris, period, because it kind of adds some confusion maybe about talking about on the surface layer of the treatment tank water, because it's stuff that's going to settle as well as stuff that's going to float that you want to catch. So I'm thinking we want to remove that last part.
Yeah, plus it's got treatment tank in it, and we don't want to go there again.
So we want to suggest the modification to remove that it's the end part about the surface debris, and also change treatment to collection.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that debris could build up in the screen and prevent water from getting into the tank at all? Or cause a dam?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Do we need to have something in there about having the ability to clear that out or access to it so debris can be removed?
Yes.
I mean, this is kind of like the skimmer basket on the front of a pool pump. You know, I would imagine that there's already some language in the MAC somewhere about this, and I think we're just trying to put it ahead of the tank instead of ahead of the pump in this situation.
Can I ask the question, do y'all feel this is worded enough that I hesitate to keep sending stuff back to be reworded or rethought out and then put it back in, since we have so many CRs as it is. If it's not reworded, or if it's not worded well as it is and it can't be easily changed, do we just vote as is? That's my question.
I suggested that first rewording, and I can vote for it as is. I would prefer not to, but I can, in the interest of time, I can go with it.
Also, I mean, there is a requirement that the grate openings for the drain not exceed a ½ inch. So obviously that could still let some smaller items down, but you know, that would kind of, and then you're also going to have your strainer in front of the filter or pump.
Yeah, what they're talking about more is the collection tank itself. That and I do understand that a lot of places don't clean that probably easily enough because it's just a pain, or clean it enough because it's a pain, and so this would help to mitigate that.
I mean, I think that the recommended changes seem to be relatively straightforward. You know, adding the ability for access. Although I do say it kind of, you know, might beg a corresponding section in Chapter 5. You know, requiring that these be maintained and cleaned. So, and that's something that would be a little bit harder to do with the current CR. So I guess, do we as a TRC feel that this is something really important to be added, and especially if there is no corresponding operational requirement, or is it something to kind of revisit in the next change request cycle?
I'm opposed to it only because I think it may impact the gravity flow rate into that system, and then you may end up with standing water back out at the pool. I also think that cleaning it may be impractical depending on how it's designed and installed. And I think it's a little bit of overkill. Are we going to have to specify the size of the mesh on the screen? We've already got ½ inch openings on the drain covers at the pool. We've got a Aaron Lynch strainer before the pump. I'm not sure we really need this. It just seems overkill.
Sounds like a no vote. Any others?
Yeah, those are good points, Joe. I would agree.
Yeah,
So
especially
does
as
anyone
written.
require as written a yes? Does anyone recommend a yes vote on the CR as written? For 12866-0001. Okay, I'll record that the TRC is recommending a no vote on this CR. Okay, I believe that this next one is the last one of this group. So let's just do this one real quick.
412.813-0002. Make sure I'm on the right one. So this is a annex edition, and it's a for foot showers. Showers are recommended at the entry to the spray pad to allow for rinsing debris from a patron's feet prior to entering the spray pad. The use of foot baths is not an acceptable alternative and should be prohibited due to the potential for disease transmission between users. Wastewater from the foot shower should be discharged to an approved waste disposal system to prevent standing water on the ground surface and or contaminating groundwater, surface water, or the spray ground.
So one thing to note is that this would be an annex section, but it's not really matched well with what the corresponding section would be. 412.813 is corresponds to NEC requirement, electrical requirement. So it would probably need to be in a different section if it was annexed material. But because foot showers are not required, there's no specific section on that. So I think it was just, you know, whether or not it's just put in the general 412.8.
It sounds like we're not recommending them. I don't know.
Well, this would just be an annex discussion and not actually a code requirement.
Just as a reminder on annex discussions, those are in the purview of the CDC. The TRC can make recommendations, but at the end of the day, they have, there's a separate committee that's charged with reconciling the annex and handling that particular piece of information, just as an FYI.
I don't see any reason not to add it, but would need to change where it's placed, I think.
Right. I think that it's not supposed to be 412.813.
Maybe just 412.8.
Or 412.814.
I don't think that's a section in with the code. So I think, yeah, just under 412.8, there is no 412.814 in the MAC, and obviously the annex section has to correspond to a code section. So I think under 412.8, and I think we can just write that up in the write-up, you know, that we recommend a vote, but, you know, recommend that CDC put this under 412.8 as a more appropriate section. So does anyone recommend a no vote on this annex edition 412.813 with -0002 with the understanding that we would find it a better home? Okay, so I'll record that we recommend a yes vote, but that, you know, we're going to recommend to CDC that it go in 412.8, which is the general section for spray grounds. We did have a comment, and I'm pulling up the CR now. So I think 412.865, we recommended a yes vote, and That's another one where treatment tank was used instead of collection tank. So I think that we're up to 3 now, Miklos, that we would just want to, actually, no, it just says tank. So I think we're okay there. And for 6866, we had a no vote. So I think we're okay. Okay, so does anyone have any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I think we can wrap this up.
I have, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Are we going to remove the summaries on this? Are we going to start sending out summaries before to try to speed these calls up, or is it just on ones we want to vote by email on? I kind of wasn't totally clear on where we were going.
I was actually going to mention that. We probably do need to go ahead. So let's just start doing this if we can. Go ahead and send out email summaries on your CRs to the group so we can kind of prep the discussion beforehand.
Can we get those in one place instead of 15 different emails though? Can we send those to you and you put them all into one email versus having 15 emails to
I think because it becomes, some of this gets done last minute, I think maybe, if each champion, if you have a bunch of CRs for the week, just include them in one email. Would that help be a smaller step, but still, I think, allow people to do it on their own time frame? I think also a lot of the CRs that we didn't get to today that we keep bumping from agenda to agenda, they were original email agenda CRs where they should be pretty non-substantive. So, we had one CR that we discussed over email, and we had a quick discussion on today's call and vote. So if they're more like that people feel like as the champions, they want to start initiating, and we could even get to a point if people feel like we want to just start voting on them over email, although it's harder to determine unless we send out like a spreadsheet, whether we're getting enough votes to reach consensus. So we might just have to, do them on a call, just real quick. But maybe instead of, even discussing them at all on a call, we'll just outline the ones that had been circulated throughout the week, ask if anyone has any questions or concerns, and then just take votes on them.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a way to kind of revisit? Because there are a bunch of CRs that had to get deferred from email, but they really shouldn't be, hopefully, too substantive. So, and I can leave it to the CR champions to pick ones, especially that you feel could just have a quick email discussion and don't really need to be addressed on a call.
I do know that for the email discussions, just in the spirit of transparency, we would try to get those organized to where we can do a summary to post on cmac.org to where members and stakeholders can see what that discussions looked like and kind of what the factors went into it. So just we would continue to do that.
I'm not sure I want to suggest this because you guys might want to kill me, but do we want to make our calls longer?
We may need to.
I'm happy to stay on the line tonight if you guys want to keep going and just get a few more of these cranked out.
If I was working in the office, I think that would work, but my current household situation, it's hard to stay for longer than this. But we can maybe try to extend them a little bit, but certainly. And I also have another call at 3:15. So.
What about having a more frequent, 2 or 3 times a week?
Well, we have to have time for the TRC members to review the information. And it's, we do also have to note that for many of the TRC, this is a volunteer role that's squeezed in the middle of a bunch of different other roles with their primary employer. So I think if we try to do more frequent calls as a norm, that might be too much of a burden on the TRC members. I want to be respectful of volunteer time. What's that, Joe?
No, I was going to say if we get more organized with summaries before the call, because I don't know about everybody else, but I'm just looking up all these CRs and I'm reading the things in real time here. And, you know, it's terribly inefficient. You know, I thought the email summaries were a lot more efficient. And I'm just thinking about the next call when this Hamburger guy's got to present like every one of these, but there's a whole subcommittee in front of me for chlorine stabilizer ad hoc committee. And I'm just wondering, are we going to get to any of those on the next call, or how are we going to start you know, organizing these things so that we're not all just individually looking up the CRs and reading through them on the phone out loud?
Yeah. One, again, a lot of it is, you know, TRC members will need to do some pre-work and just kind of review the CRs in advance. You know, that's one. You know, using the email summaries, that's another. And then shifting to, you know, where we can, email discussions is another strategy.
Hey guys, this is Kevin. I sent around, and I didn't do it until earlier today, so that's on me. But I sent around earlier today individual emails for basically about 7 or 8 different CRs that are all pretty simple for the most part, and I think they would be ideal for email voting. So I'll throw that out to you all, that if you want to try the process of email voting on those, I think they'd be good candidates for that.
And
Dewey, could we all send you some of those?
Anybody? I think Ellen commented on one, but this is Tina Moore. If you want to respond to that email.
Dewey, if we could send all these to you to organize an email vote, if we have CRs that we think could email vote, we could send them to you. I know I have one on pipe labeling that I could add to that, and I'm sure other people have some too. But if we could get them all in one place, because I'm having trouble tracking 7 different emails and figuring out if I'm supposed to respond or if we're going to vote or exactly what to do with all of them.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, I'll summarize everything. You know, there still have to be some research, you know, by the TRC members into the individual CRs, but yes, I will be more than happy to do that. You know, I know, and Amanda, I just want to give props where they're due. Amanda has done just a hell of a job in putting all this together and trying to keep it organized. And I just want to recognize to the TRC and everyone who may be listening to this recording that it's been a tremendously difficult job to do, and she has done stellar at that. And I would be more than happy to help with some of these email discussions to help share that burden with her.
Thanks, Dewey. And I would say if anyone had an email agenda CR that, you know, ended up being deferred because there wasn't a summary sent, those are the best candidates. And I think a lot of the email summaries, we had, you know, the TRC had to abstain from a bunch of those, you know, when the voting came in. And as you can see on the call, we kind of talk around things until we get to a consensus. So a lot of those we have to revisit because we didn't truly discuss it and achieve consensus. And, you know, as you can see, we're not finding very many that we're split on. You know, we might have 1 or 2 no's, but, you know, everyone pretty much feels the same way as we work through things. So maybe that now that we have a few calls done, you know, if we want to try to go back and tackle some of these email agenda CRs, and you can see on the spreadsheet the ones that, you know, have email in parentheses were originally intended to be that way. So if the CR champions want to send Dewey some summaries of the CRs, and we can try doing like another mini agenda where we vote at a certain point, I think that would certainly be good because, you know, even if we only did 5 minutes per CR, you know, I calculated that out and it was over 30 hours of discussion, and we only have 12 hours of calls left. So we do need to find another means in which to address these CRs. Just the number this time around for this change request cycle is phenomenal. And, you know, but I think if everyone kind of thinks that, you know, we can try this email again and try to get some good discussion going before it's time to vote, you know, I think we should use any means we can to keep tackling these CRs, especially the ones that shouldn't have too much discussion needed.
And we could also just vote discussion.
what I found helpful with the summaries in both the email ones and the summaries we sent out for this call was the recommendation from the CR champion on which way they were leaning and why. I found that to be very helpful.
I agree.
Another strategy just to mention, and I forgot who mentioned it earlier, possibly Jason, but the honest answer is I know we want to improve the CRs and have them better, but the honest answer is we're getting to a point to where we're probably just going to have to vote on the CRs based on their own merit. It's very noble for the MAC and for the industry to want to go back and improve these CRs. It is taking an awful lot of time to do that. So that is something that may need to happen. A couple of things I want to say just before we get off. One is I want to thank all of you. This is a very, very big task. And I don't think any of us truly appreciated the magnitude of it back in January. I want to thank you for the care and dedication, and also not wanting to just blow through things, but to also give everything the investment that it actually needs. Y'all are a very exceptional group, and I'm very glad to have all of you on the TRC. And I just want to acknowledge the work that you're putting in on top of your very demanding schedules. We also have learned some lessons already that we'll be incorporating into the next edition, the next round in 3 years, such as starting much earlier. We will be doing that with the 5th edition, but that doesn't really help us out right now. But just thank y'all for the work you're putting in, the care you're putting in, for wanting to truly make it the best it can be and not just issuing a vote just to vote. So I do want to say that even as we talk about trying to speed the process up.
Hey Dewey, I have one other suggestion regarding changes. Like with the ventilation committee, I've got a bunch of the change requests, and what I've been doing is going through those change requests and trying to work with the committee, like these wording changes about whether it's a collection tank or a treatment tank, looking for issues like that we can address before the meeting. And so we can get to consensus with the committee on that before even coming to the meeting to talk about it with you guys. So if you guys see anything, if you're a champion and you see any issues like that in the change request that could be handled offline before we have the meeting, that would be great.
Yeah. Speaking of that, on the chlorine stabilizers ad hoc committee, we are looking to have an individual from that committee attend the call. I have not confirmed who yet, but we are looking at someone to kind of summarize the discussion, because I think that will be helpful for the TRC in deciding how to proceed. We have also had a TSC member express some concerns about specifically the ventilation design and air quality ad hoc, about that not going through the TSC process. So I would ask the TRC members just to take a look at those, and if there's a consensus that we do need to have a TSC review these, I am certainly willing to do that. That would bump that from the 15th, which causes some additional issues. But if we make that decision this week, then I think we can adjust that accordingly. So just make a mental note of that to get your recommendation to me if we need to go to the TSCs by Friday for the ventilation ad hoc.
Okay, so why don't we try some more email discussion this week, but we'll have it filtered through Dewey so that, why don't we set, let's say by Wednesday, if you can get summaries to Dewey about CRs that we might want to address over email, and then he can send those out. We don't have to do it necessarily on on the same time frame as the calls, so we could have, you know, a few days for review and do a vote separate. If people want to do that, we can just make a voting list based off of the CRs that were submitted. So please copy me on all those emails too, so I can keep track of which ones we're addressing by email. So
Wednesday tomorrow?
Wednesday. You're right. This is Tuesday. I keep thinking it's Monday. Why don't we have by Friday? If people want to get summaries to Dewey, and then we can just kind of defer those to an email agenda. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Amanda, can you repeat that? It was kind of hard to hear. So by Monday, we need to give you our ones that we're going to handle via
Friday,
email.
if you want to have any CRs kind of discuss over email in the next week, why don't we get those to Dewey by Friday, and then we'll discuss them over the following week, and then you know, send out a voting list. So we won't tie them to a call. We'll kind of do a simultaneous email agenda again, along with the calls.
Okay.
So we'll first try to do any CRs that are on today's agenda that we didn't get to that were non-substantive. So anything that's basically been deferred from the email agendas or from last week's call. Okay, so thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for your time today, and we will talk next Monday. And I will try to get a summary of today's call out to everyone by the end of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.